Okay, welcome to everyone to this In Transit webinar. My name is John Cosgrove, and I'm Director of Smart Manufacturing at the IDEAM Research Institute in TUS, or the Technological University of the Shannon. Sandeep, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm Sandeep Joshi. I'm working as a Lean and Digitalization Advisor in IDEAM Institute with Dr. John Cosgrove, helping companies identify multiple opportunities within their organization in their business processes of where to simplify, and using digitalization methods, we home on to how to simplify, and also handhold them for applying for various funding opportunities so that their funding gaps are filled up and they get adequate funding at the right time so that they can scale up and accelerate their business growth in a much faster way. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandeep. And again, just for those arriving, if you get a chance during the discussion to put in your organization and where you're joining us from into the chat. It's interesting to see we have people here from Spain, Italy, Greece, France, Ireland, and yeah, so far, and I'm sure there's others. So the In Transit project is about strengthening the resilience of textiles, aerospace, and construction SMEs to transition towards greener and more digital sectors. So in the webinar today, we're going to talk a bit about costs, particularly maybe how companies can look at lowering costs of doing business, and also we'll talk a bit about digitalization and new routes to market or business opportunities through digitalization, and so that companies can engage with In Transit for the next funding call towards the end of the year under the develop call. And maybe the webinar series helps to identify opportunities for your business or in your industry sector to put forward as a proposal or to benefit the business. And my colleague there, Dr. Camilla Bibbiano, is referenced as well. Camilla can't join us, unfortunately, today, but was involved in the preparation of some of the material here. So as I said, there's two areas on the webinar. We'll take about 45 minutes. So we'll pretty much half and half, maybe a little bit more in the first section. And in each case, we'll finish with some case studies of companies that we've collaborated with or we've completed projects with, supporting their digital or green transformation. Okay, so the overview of the Innovate project. I don't know if, Sandeep, you want to address anything. The develop call is the next one that's due, the second call.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So as we all know, we have registered on In Transit platform, and we are getting more aware of Innovate call, wherein each of the companies are getting coaching in two forms. One is webinars, which are happening now, and also in the form of one-to-one coaching, where the companies can discuss what challenges they have, so that the experts on In Transit platform, different partners from different EU countries, can share their learnings as well as their experiences. And also this gives an opportunity for the companies to matchmake. Now, how is matchmaking helping is they are going to apply for, first of all, identifying the idea, the opportunity idea, or we can say idea, to apply for the develop funding, cascade funding, which is going to open up soon by end of November or so. And the companies can then apply for this funding opportunity. So where to apply, how to apply, what is the best business idea they could look for, because the projects have to be for 4 months. So these are things which could be very helpful, wherein you can ask the monitoring partners on this project, and will be really beneficial on this front. So the main aim of this webinar and such webinar series are basically to help companies identify those business ideas or these innovative ideas, wherein they can prioritize of what needs next by discussing with us as Innovate partners, as Innovate monitoring mentors as well, so that you can apply for the develop call, which is going to open up soon. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sandeep. And I should have given a reference at the to all of our partners in the project, but we'll do so at the end. So I plan on and discuss. So cost is obviously critical to business operations of any sort, whether it's manufacturing or retail or in any sector, managing your costs. So there's many costs in business, and really, I suppose the clear point is that the successful companies are those that have a strategy to reduce their business costs, have a continuous improvement process. And there's a number of different types of costs that you will encounter in business. Some of them vary as your output varies or as your activity varies. Those variable costs increase and decrease. As you make more products, you need more maintenance on equipment. You have the direct costs of business, raw materials, labor. But there's a lot of other types of costs in your company. You really should have characterized these and broken them out so that you can start to get some control over them. There are some costs, obviously, the cost of your building, your fixed costs that are annualized, like insurance, like utilities, that you can't really do maybe much about. They're fixed, but you can only try to mitigate them from year to year. And then there's always other things. There's training, there's marketing, there's external costs that happen to the business. But really, I suppose the starting point is to understand the different categories of costs that apply to your business, and then to have a strategy to reduce them and to target a continuous improvement process of reducing the costs in your business. So what I say to companies when we visit or meet them to look at reducing their costs, because it's a key part of competitiveness and on a capacity to operate, is to understand your priority. And that's a single priority. So what is the most important thing to you? Companies will often say they want to make products cheaper, they want to make them better, and they want to make them faster. That's three priorities. But in reality, there's often a trade-off. And you need to know which is more important to your business. Is fundamentally the quality of the product the most important thing to your customer? And therefore, if you make it a bit slower, and if it costs a bit more to make, then that's actually maybe a good thing because your customer wants the quality or the guarantee of quality. Maybe it's faster time to market is your most important priority. And if it is, then maybe you're going to have to pay more for materials costs because you have to source them from a closer or more local supplier. So I always say to companies, like, what is your one priority? What is the most important thing? Because that helps to focus where you should then look for improvement or where you should invest resources or time, particularly for SMEs. The time of the people in the business is one of the most critical resources. So where do you focus that time? And there's a lot of challenges around and things you can't maybe always account for. The global economic conditions have been a very significant challenge for businesses in the last couple of years, between increased electricity prices, supply chain challenges, some cases loss of markets. So it's been quite, there's been quite a bit of disruption in the international business environment. There's also always changing customer perceptions and changes in technology and new technological advances that are coming along. So lots of challenges, but I think to understand really where you can gain reductions in costs, you really need to know what is your priority, and what is how will that bring the best value to the business, where are the best places to invest your time or your resources. So the ways we've seen with companies, from a report from TDY Global, sorry, they give a number of headings, and within that report, there's a number of strategies within each heading. But the first one is the most important. It's the audit. It's to know where your costs are currently being spent, whether they're linked to your output, whether they're variable, whether they're fixed. And the strategy to how to deal with them then will change depending on that. So you can look at from the very basic level what materials you use in making your product. If you're in primary manufacturing, what energy consumption you use to make the product, how the design of the product itself, and how it's recycled, how that has an impact on costs. And then in your operations, you've got your workforce and you've got the number of parts per hour. So what can you do to optimize your uptime? What can you do to reduce the maintenance or the downtime? Um, and how do you bring all of those business parts of that together as well, then in terms of negotiating with suppliers? So there are some key areas where companies have track records of finding savings. And one of the most important is auditing. So where exactly are you spending money in the company at the moment? And I always like to refer to where you can get the most significant benefits. We do this around sustainability, around energy efficiency, but right across business costs. If you can tweak your operations, you can gain savings. It might be 3%, it might be 5%. It might reduce or increase capacity of your machines by 5% or 6%. Um, if you can get into the design of your process, then you might get savings of 20 or 30%. If you switch from a traditional subtractive industry to 3D printing, you might get that up to 40 or 50%. But if you can actually fundamentally change your product, if you can redesign, if you can bring design thinking and optimize it around sustainability, for example, if you can get at the design of your product, and that's not always possible. Companies are often take contracts from tier one suppliers if you're an SME. So if you have control over the product itself, you can actually engineer costs out by 70 or 80%. And there's plenty of examples of that. But it's something to keep in mind. If you fundamentally want to shift the costs in your business, it's actually the deeper you can get into the design process is often where the most return will come from. Okay, we mentioned, and there was topics here were selected from input from companies at an earlier stage in this project. So the supply chain in particular in recent years has been a big issue for smaller companies. It has settled a lot, I think, in the last few months. Um, and there is maybe new challenges around sustainability, around bringing your supply chain closer to your business, sourcing in Europe, where you might not have had an impetus to do that before. Um, so there is a number of areas in the supply chain that can be looked at that need careful attention. Particularly for SMEs, there's often a lot of cost in the supply chain, and some of that is often outside of their control. You may not be ordering in the volume that other larger companies are able to. So you're price takers and not able to set prices with your suppliers. Um, so I think if you have that strategy of which areas of your business are most important, if you look at the analysis of the supply chain, where the products or where the parts or where the components, raw materials are coming from, is also an opportunity there to look at the sustainability. I think we'll see every company. We're already seeing every company, but more and more we will see every company, every manufacturing SME, every technology company, every construction company looking more and more at where do I bring sustainability um, without bringing additional costs, but actually bringing savings. So it may be that there are changes in your product or process that you can make, which will shorten your supply chain, which will engineer out risks of disruption, and which will be more sustainable in the long run. And all of that leads to business resilience. So if we can reduce the dependencies externally, then obviously that will improve the resilience of the business. So digitalization is to us a major driver of reducing costs, and it's all about data. So data, data, data. I give a presentation on a very regular basis that's just called data, data, data. If you can't, as Peter Drucker said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So if you can't measure what you're bringing in from your supply chain, if you can't measure how much time is spent on a product, you can't measure how much packaging is used, you can't possibly optimize or manage the improvements there. What we've seen, and people talk all about Industry 4.0, is we've seen the new paradigms that bring far more data to the table. and bring far more data to the decision makers. So we can add cyber physical systems, we can existing edge devices or Internet of Things, IoT devices to machines, to warehouses, to cold storage, into buildings that now give us far more information, a tremendous volume of data that can be gathered in real time or near real time. And that can be on the performance of the loading in a building, can be on the operation of a clean room, it can be on the machining time or the use of lubricant in a CNC machine. We now have data that we didn't have before. We have volumes of data that we didn't have before. So the first step for any company to get a control on their costs and on their operations is to actually get a control on what data they can source. And in some cases, existing data. There are machines that have no sensors, but they have a variable speed drive controlled to a PLC or connected to a variable speed drive, a motor controlled by a PLC that has information on when it was on and when it was off, how long it ran for, what speed it ran for. And from that kind of proxy data, you know how much of the dye was pumped into the tank. So companies often have far more data than they even realize without investment. There's many data points available in a company. Where we see manual data collection, we tend to talk to companies a lot about you're probably doing well if that's between 80 and 90% accurate, because there's always errors. With manually collected data, clipboards around the factory floor or people marking up work orders or sheets, it's inevitable that there are mistakes or misreading of the data, and that brings errors. The sensors give us very consistent data and very accurate data. In one company we worked with, they talked all the time about the single source of truth. When they put data on all their machines, now there's no longer a discussion or an argument every Monday morning between planning and engineering and operations. There's a single set of data that everybody knows is accurate. So the volume of that data now gives us a problem because humans can't process that data. And many of the systems we've developed in tools like Excel, while they're brilliant, they're limited and they take a lot of overhead, a lot of time to develop. But the thing is that, you'll hear lots of references to artificial intelligence as a driver of business. The reality is there's still very little artificial intelligence, but there are very good statistical tools like machine learning, deep learning, that are often referred to as part of AI. But those tools can analyze large amounts of data. And there is lots of very good and helpful tool chains and techniques available that can identify patterns in your very large data sets. So whether that's looking at the wear in a machine, looking at maintenance cycles, just looking at the capacity, available capacity and order fulfillment. There's much better ways now of analyzing that a human wouldn't be able to do in a reasonable time frame. So getting to grips with that in an organization, and sometimes small companies will say to me, look, we don't have that expertise, but more and more we see companies hiring people with data science backgrounds or data analytics because the benefits are there once they go down that journey. And that's, as I said, wrapped up around in Industry 4.0 or digitalization or whatever terminology you choose to use. But it does give the companies who embrace it, it gives them opportunities to optimize their operations, to respond faster, to target their efforts where attention is needed, and to effectively, to be more effective, to be more resilient, to be more competitive, and to win business. I mean, at the end of the day, to win more business, particularly with the workforce that they have. Okay. So some very big estimates here that if companies across Europe and the world were to adopt Industry 4.0, the top 100 European manufacturers could save about 160 billion in scrap or reworked parts. Now, many companies, depends on your manufacturing sector. We work particularly with precision engineering companies that supply aerospace and automotive. There's a lot of waste. There's a lot of parts that are made and scrapped. There's a lot of waste in the making of the parts, and that has a considerable cost to the business. Firstly, it takes away productive capacity. and secondly, obviously, it's wasting raw materials that cannot necessarily be reused. So you're doing work you don't get paid for, and you're taking away capacity to do added value work. There's numerous reports out there. I just summarized that things like advanced analytics in predictive maintenance, companies can reduce their machine failures by cut downtime by 50% and increase production by 20%. So if you look at a factory with 20 or 30 machines in it, and you say, look, by having a smarter maintenance system, we can gain 20% more capacity. That could be the difference in buying 3 or 4 machines, and doing more with the machines you have, which is which is always good for your bottom line, always good for the business costs. And the World Economic Forum has, reports there that there is trillions and billions of value available to companies who adopt Industry 4.0. And we'll give some examples. I'll give some examples of that in the case studies in a few minutes. Okay. So this is a model I like to present from Ronald Berger. It's actually a couple of years old, but I think it's actually representative of where we are. It showed that the first benefits, the first added value in the adoption of digitalization came from the automotive industries and logistics industries. And you've all seen that. You've seen all the welding machines running, in the BMW production line in Munich. You've seen the Amazon warehouses with the robots traveling around, loading and unloading all of the orders. So they were the early adopters, if you like, of digitalization. And there was very significant, their value in billions of value add in those industries from the adoption of robotics, automation, digitalization. Where we are currently is that kind of mechanical and plant engineering, often more SMEs. And that's where companies today are adopting technology. It's a little bit more difficult, but the potential, because of the large number of smaller companies, the potential to add value is quite considerable. The level of waste is higher, the level of scrap is higher, the level of rework is higher. So the opportunity potential from digitalization is considerably higher. And I kind of think over the last 5 years, that's the wave we've been in Ireland. Different countries may be slightly at different levels in that. And in other industries, the opportunity is a little bit less. And it's not because the technology doesn't work. It's because of the regulatory nature in aerospace, chemicals, medtech. It's slower to adopt changes. It's slower to adopt new technologies and slower to really embrace some of the new digitalization techniques and technologies that are available. So an example here of a car manufacturing plant on the right-hand side that adopted a very deep digitalization. They saw their profitability of the manufacturing site nearly double. Well, sorry, more than double. The utilization of the plant, which was at 65%, went up to 90%. So they didn't invest as much in new technologies as they were able to reuse capacity that they already had. And the big saving in one respect was the reduction in staff. So the reduction in headcount. And automation is often linked with we're going to destroy jobs and it's going to have very negative impacts in our society. But the majority of the companies that we've worked with, they don't reduce jobs. They actually increase output. So deep automation actually allows the same number of people to produce 2 or 3 times more output and more value to the company. And that's what we try to talk to people. What we do is there's the destruction, not the destruction of jobs, but the destruction of tasks that can be better done now with technology in various shapes or forms. So robotics is often seen as, and I know we've industry here from different sectors, and I suppose robotics are coming into all sectors in some shape or form, but have been common in manufacturing for a few years. The OECD report from 2 years ago estimates 1 in 7 workers in advanced economies likely to lose their jobs to automation. And that is automation of all sorts. It's robotic process automation or software automation. It's new tools, as well as the obvious robots and virtual assistants and things like that. a number of the national studies that we have in Ireland would show almost 1 in 4 jobs in areas like manufacturing and agriculture being at risk from mechanization and automation. So depending on the sector, the number of jobs at risk is even higher. And one of the areas that is the most, I suppose, the poster child, it's the most obvious thing that's seen is robots in manufacturing lines. But what they bring when they're correctly installed, designed, and match the products that they're being used for, they bring significant reductions in costs. So there is an investment in robotics, but if you have production systems running 7 days a week, 24 hours a day at sufficient volume to justify the investment in robotics, then they do produce outputs at a lower cost per unit. So that competitiveness becomes a very important part of if your competitors or your competitor countries are investing significantly in robotics, then they will bring down over time the cost of the inputs to production and therefore will be more competitive. And if your country or your business isn't doing the same thing, then you're going to be at a disadvantage. I include a graphic there on the right hand side, and it's as up to date as it gets. It's up to 2023, or sorry, 2022, but showing the number of installed robots per 10,000 employees in the manufacturing industry in different countries. And for a number of years, South Korea has been leading the way. They're also the manufacturer of many robotics, well-known robotics companies, followed by Germany, Japan, China. And you can see the increase in China in a couple of years in the amount of robotics has been quite staggering. And it's quite quite a change in how they're building their production lines and manufacturing facilities. And we have Italy there and France. We know the situation maybe in the UK is at about 140, and in Ireland it's actually under 100. So we don't have we're actually advising companies consistently that we need to do more about automation and robotics for the reasons of a lack of competitiveness. That if other countries are investing at this level of automation in their production lines, then they will see longer term advantages in competitiveness over companies operating in Ireland. Okay. And just to follow up, like the growth in robotics has been quite outstanding in the last year. So last year to this year was over 10% increase in the number of robots installed in the world. It's moving rapidly. And it is the big areas are in materials handling, and by far, so any part that needs to be picked up and moved, or packaged, or moved from one part of a machine to another part of a machine, those tasks are all being replaced by So product handling is in manufacturing is the by far the largest application area. Applications like welding, you can see the links to the traditional automotive industries. That's probably even reducing now. Clean rooms and dispensing. And there's a number of areas in global robotics that are happening. So you're seeing more AI with robotics, where the robots are actually getting a bit more of self-direction through the AI tools. Cobotics, which is talked about a lot, but it's still quite small. The amount of robots sold is 90+% are traditional robots in a cage. And less than 10% are collaborative robots, or robots that are not in a cage and can interact with people. We see policymakers talking an awful lot about robots working with people, but it is a very small market segment to date. And then the other areas of technology, I'll jump on a little. So the other area of lower costs we like to stress, particularly relevant to in transit, is around sustainability. And there's a lot of important reasons to look at sustainability. We all know what's happening around us with climate change, with terrible floods and events in different countries in recent times. I just saw the news earlier of the largest hurricane ever to hit Florida is about to hit today, with huge potential destruction. So, all of that, the change in the climate is obvious. So why should companies engage in sustainability? Well, okay, we're all on this one planet. So that's important. But it's also to retain or open up business opportunities. Like more and more, the tier one companies are going to look for as they have to meet corporate social responsibilities. They have to meet reporting, like the Corporate Social Responsibility Directive, and they have to engage in their, in good governance. The more they're going to look to the suppliers, the smaller companies who supply them, to account for their carbon footprint, to account for their use of materials, their use of water, and so on. So if your company can position itself, then there are business opportunities as other companies maybe don't get, or aren't able to grasp those kind of new, more sustainable business models. Um, we believe there's a lot of interest in the new workforce, in younger members of society, in working in companies who have a good corporate, sustainable corporate message and practice. Okay. And there are cost savings. If you reduce your energy and water usage, you directly reduce costs that go to the bottom line. Um, but there's also, reducing the risk of something going wrong. Environmental liability is becoming very significant. If you have an accidental discharge from your company or from a process that causes pollution, the ramifications of that today are considerably more because it's reported on much wider, it's carried, um, you potentially have reputational damage, and people can see that into the future because they can Google it when they Google the name of your company. So there are quite a lot of reasons to look at sustainability. One of the fundamental ones for me is that sustainability in many ways is about reducing waste. Now, so is lean. Lean is a really important business process to manage your company, to reduce your costs. And lean is all about reducing waste or eliminating waste, or what's called muda in the Kaizen Bibles. Um, so I think it's important to really look at how you engage your company in that sustainability journey, and where there's opportunities maybe for your organization. And it's always important to bring your employees with you. In fact, in many good companies, the employees are driving many of the sustainability activities. So an area we've worked very closely with companies to reduce costs is on their energy, particularly their electricity usage. The graph that's shown there is a medtech company. It's a large medtech company, and that's their annual electricity usage mapped out for every week of the year. And you'll see at the weekends, the bottom part of the graph are the weekends, and there's a shutdown in August and a shutdown at Christmas. Um, but the amount of wasted energy that they have, of machines left running, of uh, of activities. They don't have much production output at the weekends, but they still have a very large electricity consumption in all their compressors and their heating and ventilation, air conditioning systems, as well as in their machines. So we developed a lean approach with companies that I won't go into now, but we've helped many companies to reduce their electricity usage by 20% or more. And it's true looking at your priority, like which is your product that's going through, and looking at how does energy touch that on that product? How does that product link to the energy consumption? And then optimizing based on that approach. That's a standard lean approach. And then looking at how you can change the behavior of the people that are in control of that, looking at how you change the process through maybe investment, and then looking at how you even engineer the design of the product to be more sustainable or to use less energy. But the benefits of really looking closely at your electricity bills, your gas bills, and your energy is that the savings go directly to the bottom line. So you have opportunities really to save money and reinvest that in other parts of the business. So very quickly, just some case studies that we worked with companies in trying to optimize their business or reduce their costs. One of our local companies, Takumi, we helped them put some digital integration on their CNC machines. That really showed them how to get their most important priority was their on-time delivery to their customers. They were able to bring that up from 80% to 90%. And essentially, it was by rebalancing existing capacity that they had. So it didn't need a new investment. It didn't need new machines. But the data was able to show them where they could focus their attention. Um, Boston Scientific, we had a batch-based sampling system on the production lines that was converted into an online system using machine learning, and reduced the time for a team of about 12 engineers and manufacturing technicians by about 12%. Again, a significant cost saving in the business. And in Stryker, in a 3D additive printing system, again, by focusing in on what was the critical component, which was actually to shorten it was to improve the quality, but it was to shorten the time in the construction of the 3D print, because delays in that caused essentially quality defects in the final product. And by focusing in on that, they were able to see what were the triggers that would reduce that and improve that quality output. A couple of more, and we'll share these slides with you afterwards, so you're welcome to look at them. And some of them have case studies on our website. You may be familiar with a glue called Loctite. One of the plants in the world that makes it is in Henkel in Dublin. It's a process that has been around for many, many years. Taking all of the SCADA data, so supervisory control and automation data from the factory going back over about 7 years, the engineer was able to apply some machine learning techniques called random forest data analysis on that historical plant data, and then align that with maintenance records over the same time period, and was able to find predictors in the data that was leading to maintenance requirements. The result was a drop in 50% in the deviations that they were having, and a 5% increased throughput in the plant, which was quite a significant benefit gained to the company. Lufthansa Technics are a company close to us here in Shannon, and they do a lot of repair of parts in the aerospace industries, and they use electrode discharge machining for that. They were looking at the purchase of a very expensive EDM machine, but by looking at the wear on the existing tool and adding some monitoring systems to that, they were able to double the capacity of the existing machine. That avoided that investment. Again, at a cost saving to the business that was very significant. Zimmer also make implants, metal implants. And again, looking at an IoT solution that they added at a fairly low cost to some grinders, Haas grinder machines, they were able to restructure two parts to that. One was the maintenance and downtime, and also the amount of materials they have to keep for maintenance. They were able to focus on that. But they also, as a kind of a side product, identified that they weren't optimal in how they were allocating work to the machines. So there may be 10 or 12 setups in a month to make 10 or 12 different products. They were able to bring that down to 5 by better balancing which orders were completed on which machines. And again, that they're rolling that out to a larger area of the factory. So considerable savings in unplanned maintenance, but also just in scheduling, again, within existing capacity. So that's where we really love to see benefits to companies. It's not a big investment from outside. It's not a big robotics investment. There are savings there to be had if you can analyze what you're doing first. Okay, and I've mentioned we've seen significant savings in energy, particularly electricity use at what we call zeros, significant energy reduction opportunities. So, and you know, there's a lean approach to doing that requires continuous improvement, kind of continuous, because every quarter and every year, you know, you need to look again at energy costs, at electricity, at your suppliers, at how you tender for your electricity, but then also how you use it within the plant. And many factories have very little monitoring, so very little data in place to actually how they use the electricity or the gas or the heat or the water in the facility. And that's a really good area for, if you're new to digitalization, these are really good areas to start with, rather than, if you like, your core production operations. But to learn more about data analytics and use of data and IoT and cyber physical systems, you know, your supply chain, your stores, warehousing, your facilities, these are very good places to start to build capacity and expertise. Okay. So I don't know if you want me to take any questions, Sandeep, at this stage, or do you want to wait until the end?
John, I think I've put that in the chat actually. Just we will try to complete the section, and we can give around 10 to 15 minutes if possible at the end, if that's okay with you. Or we can, if there is some urgent questions, if somebody wants to quickly ask something, I can ask now if you want to take.
Okay, I'll jump a bit quicker through this part. It's shorter anyway. But
Okay.
so the other topic we were asked to look at was in new business models and routes to market. And I'm sure for many of the business people on this call, you have plenty of expertise in this area. Um, for me, I think there's an interesting starting point. And it is, what is it that you do that adds value? Like, what is, if you're a blacksmith, you can make metal parts and you can potentially make them better or more beautiful than anywhere else. And so you can add value, and a company has to be able to define that. What is the way you can add value? Okay. And what comes from that is then where is your market? Like, where can you realize that value? And is it what market? Where is the market? Geographically, what sector it's in, what vertical or horizontal. Um, and these are fundamentals that I think anyone, leading a successful business can clearly enumerate what they do to add value, what their unique selling point is, um, and what and where is the market that will appreciate that. Okay. So I think if you can answer those questions, then you start to look at, well, where will the market be in 5 years' time or 10 years' time? Because if you start down the route of a new innovation or a new product or a new digital technology you're adopting, there's going to be some time to bring that through to fruition. So it isn't really where's your market today or what does your customer tell you today they need. It's where will the overall market be in a couple of years, whether that's 3 years or 5 years down the road or maybe 10 years, depending on your industry. Um, and then, the thing we've seen consistently the last 10 years is disruption. So if you can see where your market is heading in the next 5 years, well, where will that get disrupted? Where will the innovations come from? And I suppose if you understand that, you're a long way towards how do you position yourself, your company, your product, your processes, your people. How do you position all of that to take advantage? Okay, so that you're ready when you are the disruptor, or you bring the innovation to the market. A good colleague of mine working in Siemens in Ireland presents and talks a lot about faster horses. So when the car was being brought to market at the end of the 1800s, if you'd ask people, across the United States what they wanted at that point, they would have answered that they wanted faster horses. They wanted horses that could cover between Chicago and New York in a shorter time frame, that needed less food, that needed to sleep less, that could carry more weight. But the disruption was with the Model T car that Ford brought to and Mercedes-Benz initially. The disruption was the car. And we've had 100 years essentially of domination by the automotive sector in terms of transportation. But COVID raised some serious questions as to why do you need to travel at all? It isn't now that we need a faster car or a car that uses less energy or a car that can carry more people. Actually, the fundamental disruptor to the business is we can now work from home. To know where is your market going to go to, and where do you need to position your business to best do that? Okay, I see Sandeep is looking at me, so I'm obviously running out of time. So there's a number of questions around, and as I said to the business people here, you know what all of this is. What is your unique selling point, and how do you position it? And there's a number of ways of developing your business through online channels, through franchising, licensing, and so on, and a lot of information out there around that. I'd like to jump to just a couple of the new business models that we've seen, particularly in terms of thinking of the developed call. Um, You've all seen the disruptive businesses in digitalization, the Ubers, the Airbnbs. Uber don't own any cars, Airbnb don't own, but they are platforms. And in manufacturing and other industries, the successful developments have been where people have brought platforms and their products together. Okay. And in many cases, that's not been done by one company. It's not being done by, the person manufacturing the product is actually selling it on an online place where someone else has developed a platform. And that collaboration is a key part of providing new business models. Is a key. Those kind of orchestrated value networks are really important to value creation. And we are seeing this shifting in companies from production to services. And that's certainly something to consider in your business. If you are a more traditional manufacturing business, is to think about how can you move from that traditional production to service-oriented products. So equipment as a service is one example of that, and more companies who sell machines or products like that are adding services as part of that, even down to and using that as a key product differentiator. So what can you offer along with your machine or your equipment that enhances its overall value? And those areas are growing considerably. The usual case studies that are talked about, Hilti, a company who make drills, now they actually sell holes. So they sell contracts to large construction sites saying, you want 10,000 holes drilled. We supply all the drills, all the spare parts, all the drill bits, and we service them and we replace them and we train your people on them. And you just have a fixed price for 10,000 holes. Michelin did something similar with tires with commercial trucking companies in the US, where now you pay for the miles. And interesting byproducts have come from some of those things. By monitoring the mileage, Michelin were able to help the trucking companies identify driving practice and identify people who needed retraining or maintenance that was needed on trucks because they could see the wear in the tire patterns. And that was because it was on an online platform, they were able to feed that directly back in. The key to that is really knowing what's important to your customers, what it is that your customer actually wants to buy. Do they want to buy your drills or do they just want some holes drilled? And if you can find a sweet spot like that in your marketplace, then there's definite benefits to moving to services. But I'd like to give just two examples or three examples of companies we've worked with, which are more representative, I think, of their manufacturing SMEs who have moved to digital. So Total Plastics are a successful company, small company with 35 employees in a rural area in Ireland, making traditional injection molding parts that go into a number of tier one suppliers in the automotive sector. But they could see that market was very competitive. Maybe margins were getting tighter. Maybe they were too small to win some of the business. So it was an industry under pressure, as automotive has been for a couple of years now. So they started looking at higher services. So they have really deep expertise in injection molding. So now they sell their services, their knowledge around injection molding machines. They repair injection molding machines for other people, or they design jigs and fixtures and molds for other people. And then they started looking at how they could better manage their machines and other people's machines. So they've developed an embedded circuit board that captures data from inside the CNC machine that's added to existing machines, but it ties into an ERP system that optimizes their production pathways, the amount of tooling, all sorts of things like that. And with their expertise, they're now helping and supplying this into other companies as a service. And they did that with our help, developing a digital twin of the machine that they're embedding into their controller and software. Shannon Coil Springs were a long-standing company in Ireland for nearly 60 years. Again, a small manufacturing SME, but they made a lot of products that went into the oil and gas industries. So they made springs that are in oil rigs, things that are huge, 2 meters in size. And typically their products were quite large. But they had a lot of expertise in materials and metals and springs and tension. And, so they looked at how could they look at other markets. And they started by making small products for the medtech industry. And these are tiny, tiny little springs. And it started out with being one small area of the business. It's now over 50% of the value of the business is in the medtech industry, and they're transitioning further and further out of construction and oil and gas and those areas. It's more profitable. It's a better area to work in. But it also has brought deep digital connectivity because they're now integrated with their customers. the quality control around medtech has required them to put sensors and technology in place and to integrate in that kind of whole network of value with the medtech companies. And they're very good at that, but it has made a big difference to their business. So they've moved to digital. And then Takumi company we also worked with and that I mentioned earlier, they saw a business opportunity on plating. A different company in Ireland that closed down left a gap in the market. They saw an opportunity for plating, but they needed to develop this at a kind of as a lower a cost as possible. They did that through the development of a digital twin. They're very familiar with digitalization techniques, so they looked at how they could use the digital twin in the design and then now in the operation of the plating line. They built that essentially with local uh, expertise, and it's up and running. You see a picture of it there, and you can see the digital twin, which is still running now, connected to the control system, and is also the full maintenance repository for everything to do with every nut, bolt, and screw in that assembly is captured within the digital twin. So they now can adopt it, and in some of the design steps they took there, they were able to reduce the amount of operator time by 20% through modeling in the digital twin, and they're still optimizing parts of the production process. And that's an SME employing about 100 people, and they're adopting a digital twin technology and using it to get business value and to open up a new market for them. And the last one, a company we also work in our cluster with, called WASP in Tralee. These guys are real experts. They started by making 3D printers, and they developed a number of 3D printer techniques. They started selling printer heads. They started developing better flow systems for the 3D printers. But then they pivoted that business into making products. So they have a number of their own 3D printers, but now they make products on behalf of IKEA, Lidl, Helly Hansen, Puma, and Next, and they have a number of other customers. And in the case of something from Lidl, the part that you order it on the IKEA website, it might be a plastic part for a child's room, a door handle, and you won't know. It'll arrive from IKEA in a box 2 days later, but it will have come from Tralee in the west of Ireland and been shipped into Western Europe, rather than coming on a ship from China. It'll have been made locally and shipped locally in IKEA branded, and the order comes through fully autonomously from IKEA into their machines and is built. They have quite a lights out service on the machines. So they do on demand 3D printing, and they have built a very nice business, a very successful business in Tralee, from 2 people up to about 25 people now. By essentially developing the digital platform that allows other people to use their facilities. And again, there's some nice case studies of those on our website. So I didn't leave a lot of time for questions, but hopefully we'll happily stay on for a few minutes to answer any questions, or if anyone has any comments, feel free to put them into the chat as well. And I did say at the very end, I would mention all of the partners in Transit Project. I know some of them are on the call. You can see the list of partners there, along with IDEAM, our research institute.
Thank you so much, John, for sharing very interesting insights and experiences on different case studies which you have worked on the topic of lowering costs and also the routes to markets. It was very interesting to understand about where and how to lower the cost the companies can look into. And also it was interesting to know how the companies have actually applied those, for example, data analysis, etc., including IoTs and robots, to actually find different routes to market to expand their business. The podium is the forum is now open actually for people to raise or ask questions, and it will be interesting to answer them in the time available.
Thanks, Sandeep. Yeah, if anyone wants to, you can open your mic and ask a question directly if you wish, or you can put a question into the chat, or
I think as people are waiting for asking questions. I just had a quick question, John, so that they can actually come back, and if we have some questions, we can actually answer them as well directly. The first one is as you have been seeing, which part or in an organization structure and companies adopt robotics in the hierarchy of the organization. In which part, for example, higher management, medium, or the lower management, do you see that there are more jobs getting added compared to the jobs which are getting kind of modified?
So it's a little bit difficult to judge in the Irish market because we're at full employment in Ireland, and we actually have quite a significant labour shortage. So if you open a new production line in a plant here and you need 20 production operators, it's almost impossible to recruit those. So the approach fundamentally is to automate as much of that as possible, and to try and use existing personnel to cover the parts that humans maybe need to do. So in terms of quality assurance, overall monitoring, and planning and scheduling, the use of the tools. So we struggle to recruit into manufacturing, also into construction, also into retail, because we're literally at full employment in the Irish market currently. So I think in Ireland it's easy to say robotics and automation are crucial to business expansion, or even for business to stay still. They have to be looking at optimizing their production systems.
Thanks, John. We have almost 2 minutes left. If any of you have questions.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. If anyone has any comments they want to leave in the chat, even for the next time we're doing a discussion or a presentation like this, feel free to suggest anything you'd like to see more of or more detail on. The time flew very fast there. I'm afraid I probably ran over a little bit time-wise, and as you can see, we've many other kind of very interesting case studies with companies, and we try our best to bring those companies to present to other companies. That's a lot of our events that we run locally. We have one on the 22nd of October where we really believe the message to manufacturing SMEs, particularly who need to embrace digitalization, the best place to learn that message is from other companies who are already doing it. And that's a key part of our kind of industry cluster.
Yeah. Right. I think it's time, I think, John, so we can close the webinar. Thank you all very much for joining, and I'm sure you would have had a great insights in terms of different topics which were covered, some case studies which were covered, so that this gives you different types of ideas or opportunities that could be identified internally within your own companies to actually home on to or prioritize those set of ideas where you can partner with other companies, or yourself you could apply for the upcoming funding call. And that's the whole aim of these webinars. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much, John, as well, for sharing the interesting insights and experiences. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.